Albert Camus, philosopher, novelist, journalist, rebel, a man who never claimed to have all the answers, but who gave us a powerful way of looking at life, the philosophy of the absurd. A man who lived through war, poverty, and illness, yet never lost his passion for life and his belief in humanity. A man whose ideas still challenge and inspire us today. That's what we'll talk about in this episode of Philosophy in a Minute. But first, as always, if you would like to get more philosophy delivered straight to you every week, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any new episodes. Albert Camus was born in 1913 in Mondovi, a small town in French Algeria. The first 7 years of his life were marked by great hardship. His father, Lucien, a bank clerk, was killed in World War I, when Albert was less than a year old. His mother, Catherine, struggled to raise Albert and his younger brother alone. She was partially deaf and could not read or write. They were dirt poor and often hungry. Catherine had 2 clean houses to make ends meet. Despite these difficult circumstances, young Albert showed an early aptitude for learning. His mother was deeply concerned that her son was different. "You are strange," she would say to him. "You will never work at anything." But his intelligence did not go unnoticed. When he was 9 years old, a teacher named Louis Germain recognized his brilliance and helped him earn scholarships to better schools, eventually opening the doors of secondary education for him. Camus later said that without this teacher, he would never have become who he was. At university, he studied philosophy and dreamed of becoming a professor, but life dealt him another blow. He developed tuberculosis, forcing him to spend 2 years in a sanatorium. This experience not only left him with a lifelong cough, but also ended his career ambitions. Camus realized he would never be strong enough to teach again, but he continued to write and think. Despite the limitations placed upon him by his illness, he sought to find meaning in a world that often seemed indifferent to his struggles. And this confrontation with life's indifference became the foundation of Camus's philosophy. What is the meaning of life? Camus saw that the universe gave no clear answer. On one side, we humans crave clarity, order, and purpose. On the other side, the world remains silent. Camus called this tension the absurd, but instead of despair, he offered a radical solution. Accept the absurd and live fully. Life, he argued, does not need ultimate meaning to be worth living. It is enough to experience love, friendship, beauty, and even struggle. Camus did not think that life should end with our youth. Age doesn't mean wisdom, and dignity comes from your actions and choices. Even in the darkest times, one can find reasons to keep going. In his famous essay, The Myth of Sisyphus, Camus retold the Greek legend of a man condemned by the gods to push a rock uphill for eternity, only to watch it roll down every time it neared the top. Camus declared, "We must imagine Sisyphus happy, because in embracing his fate, Sisyphus finds freedom. The struggle itself is enough to fill a man's heart." Camus wasn't just a thinker. He was a man of action. During World War II, when France was under the control of Nazi Germany, he joined the French resistance. He worked as a courier for an underground newspaper called Combat, delivering messages and distributing leaflets that opposed the Nazis. In 1944, after the liberation of Paris, Camus was appointed editor of Combat, which became one of the most important newspapers during the post-war period. Through his writing, he fought against tyranny, injustice, and oppression, and this experience deepened his commitment to social justice and his belief in the power of individual action against oppressive forces. Later, he became increasingly involved in politics, advocating for workers' rights and social reform. But despite his political activism, Camus never joined a political party. He remained independent, believing that parties often limited freedom of thought and action. In his view, people should be free to come to their own conclusions about the world and act accordingly, rather than being bound by rigid ideologies or dogmas. He valued individual liberty and autonomy so highly that he was even willing to disagree with himself in order to uphold these principles. Camus believed that revolutions often became the very thing they set out to oppose, becoming oppressive and violent. He saw the absurdity in blindly following a system, especially when it came to political ideologies. He feared that when a revolution replaced one set of leaders with another, the cycle of oppression and violence would simply continue. Camus also believed that individuals should not allow themselves to be consumed by hatred or anger, even in the face of injustice and oppression. In his view, hatred and anger were dangerous emotions that could easily be manipulated by those in power to control and oppress the people. Instead, Camus advocated for a more nuanced and compassionate approach to political activism. He believed that people should strive to understand the perspectives of those who held different political beliefs, and that they should engage with them in a spirit of mutual respect and tolerance. By doing so, he argued, people could work together to create positive change without resorting to violence or oppression. In 1948, he published The Rebel, a book in which he explored the nature of revolt and the conditions under which it could be justified. In it, he argued that revolt against oppressive forces was a legitimate response to tyranny and injustice. However, he also cautioned against the dangers of using violence or hatred as a means of achieving political goals. According to Camus, revolt should be based on a clear set of principles and should aim to create a better world. without resorting to the same oppressive tactics that the rebels sought to overthrow. His major works include The Stranger, The Plague, and The Rebel. In The Stranger, the protagonist, Merceau, represents the absurd man. He lacks conventional morality and is indifferent to societal norms. The novel explores themes of alienation, meaninglessness, and the search for authenticity in a world that seems indifferent to human concerns. In The Plague, Camus used the outbreak of bubonic plague in the Algerian city of Oran as a metaphor for fascism and the universal struggle of humanity against suffering. The characters in the novel grapple with fear, death, and the search for hope and solidarity in the face of overwhelming adversity. And in The Rebel, Camus examined the causes and consequences of rebellion against oppressive forces. He argued that revolt against tyranny and injustice was a legitimate response, but cautioned against the dangers of using violence or hatred as a means of achieving political goals. In 1957, at just 44 years old, Albert Camus received the Nobel Prize in Literature. The Swedish Academy praised him for shedding light on the problems of the human conscience in our time. Sadly, Camus would never receive the honor of giving a Nobel Prize lecture because his life was cut short. He died on January 4, 1960, when the car he was riding in crashed near Paris. He was only 46 years old. The cause of the accident was never fully determined, but Camus was not wearing a seatbelt, and there was some speculation that he may have been intoxicated at the time. When Camus died, he left behind a body of work that explored some of the deepest and most challenging questions of our time. His writings on the absurd, revolt, and the meaning of life continue to inspire and provoke readers around the world. In fact, in a letter to his publisher, Camus said, "I believe that life is essentially absurd. The universe is silent and indifferent to human suffering. Thus we must either surrender to this absurdity or revolt against it." And revolt we did. People everywhere have related to Camus' ideas, because he spoke to the struggles we all face in finding meaning and purpose in a world that can often seem chaotic and unpredictable. He taught us to embrace life in all its complexities and to confront the absurd with courage, dignity, and compassion. Now, check out this playlist with more videos on existentialism, including 10 interesting facts about Jean-Paul Sartre. And as always, if you want to get more philosophy delivered straight to you every week, make sure to subscribe. And if you want to support the channel directly, please consider becoming a member. Thank you very much. See you next time.